Today on The World Today, Belarus moves hundreds of migrants from freezing camps into shelter as German Chancellor Angela Merkel discusses with Belarusian leader. A state of emergency is declared in the Canadian western province of British Columbia. That's after a major storm cut road and rail links in the region. And Greece begins espionage trial of 24 aid workers. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Anne Nwawadu. We begin with a lingering migrants crisis in the Belarus EU border. Belarusian authorities are now moving to ease pressure along the country's frontier with Poland, and that's after the main border crossing erupted in violence, with desperate migrants hurling stones at Polish border guards who responded with tear gas and blasts from water cannons. Hundreds of the migrants are now being sheltered in a sprawling brick warehouse a few hundred yards from the crossing, a much-needed bit of relief for scores of families who have spent weeks camping in freezing fields with little more than the clothes on their backs.
Dozens of migrants gathered in a camp on the border between Belarus and Poland on Thursday, following days of clashes between border forces and migrant groups. Around 200 to 300 people, mainly men, but also families with young children, remained huddled around makeshift fires near the Koznica-Bruzgi border point. Migrants could be seen huddled around campfires, with many wearing several layers of clothing in an effort to keep warm. Some of the migrants left the camp near the Belarus-Poland border and were escorted by armed Belarus guards to the temporary shelter in the logistics center. In the meantime, Belarus proposes to return 5,000 migrants to their countries, while the European Union shall take in 2,000 migrants on the Belarus-Poland border. President Alexander Lukashenko's spokesperson said this was discussed with German Chancellor Angela Merkel during a phone call, and that Merkel had agreed to discuss it with the European Union.
The first conversation with Angela Merkel, the mechanism which was offered by the President, was the following. The European Union will create a humanitarian corridor for 2,000 refugees who are in the camp. We take an obligation upon ourselves to assist the other 5,000 as much as possible, and in case they are willing to return home. And Angela Merkel, according to the agreements, will hold talks with the EU, including organization of humanitarian corridor to Germany.
The European Union has accused Lukashenko of orchestrating an influx of migrants to EU members Poland, Lithuania and Latvia to pressure the EU to back down over sanctions slapped on his government. Belarus has repeatedly denied the accusation.
In the meantime, British Secretary of Defense Ben Wallace is expressing support for Poland amid the migrant crisis the country is currently facing at its border with Belarus. Visiting his Polish counterpart, he said what's happening is a deliberate and concerted attempt to destabilize not only Poland, but some of the other neighboring countries.
Great Britain, because make no mistake, what's happening on the Belarus border is a deliberate and concerted attempt to destabilize not only Poland, but some of the other neighboring countries like Latvia, etc., to make sure that Europe is weaker in order to further other people's agendas. And the best response to that is that we stand shoulder to shoulder, not only as NATO countries, but also old friends and partners, to send a strong message that we won't allow this to happen. And also we call upon Belarus to stop this appalling effort to use humans as a way to destabilize countries. Some of the most vulnerable people from across the world are being forced towards this border in a callous and cold calculation.
Ricardo Makina, VOA's correspondent, joins us now for more on this. Hello, Ricardo.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's good to see you. Now, things are a bit different from yesterday, isn't it, as the migrants are now being sheltered by Belarusian authorities. What do you think?
For sure. Till yesterday we had a very difficult situation with these people in the border frozen. The situation was dramatic in all levels. Now Belarusian authorities, after the conversation with Angela Merkel, decide to move big part of these migrants to places where it's not cold, so these people now is protected somehow. Today we saw the first planes of migrants going back home to Iraq. So yes, we see it's the first day that we have good news and maybe some hope that these people will have a better situation in the next coming days.
Now talk to us more about the talks between German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Belarus President. We understand Mr. Lukashenko is making some demands.
Yes, Lukashenko wants to be treated as the legitimate president of Belarus. We must remember that after the elections last summer, in the summer of 2020, almost all European countries don't recognize Belarusian leader as the winner of these elections. So he wants to be again recognized as the president of Belarus. So it seems to me, as correspondent in this area, that all this strategy is the way to Lukashenko to be back in the international arena as the real president of Belarus. So how European leaders will deal with this situation will define the relationship between European Union and Belarus for the next year.
And talking about defining things, Mr. Lukashenko is also sending Chancellor Angela Merkel to the European Union. Will the European Union be willing to listen and adhere to these proposals that will be tendered, seeing that this week there were plans for a 6th round of sanctions on his government?
Yes, so the real interesting thing now is if Belarus and Europe agree in have a final solution to this very bad situation in the border with Poland. Maybe Lukashenko managed to avoid a new round of sanctions. But a lot of countries in Europe, especially the Baltics and Poland, want to go ahead with the sanctions. So we will see a fight inside the European Union countries to see if finally there are new sanctions and how hard these sanctions are. We must remember also that Lukashenko said that he can close the gas, Russian gas, that cross Belarus in the way to Europe. So it's another threat that he has in his hand. So we expect to have a few weeks of political tensions between Minsk and Brussels. That is for sure.
All right, we'll keep our fingers crossed and see the outcome of that. Thank you so much, Ricardo, for your time.
Thank you.
More than 24 aid workers will go on trial after a role in helping to rid Greece between 2016 and 2018 on Thursday. The defendants face a raft of charges, including espionage, forgery, and unlawful use of radio frequencies. Human rights groups have condemned the trial as being politically motivated, and Amnesty International has even called the charges partial. Well, Lesbos, the island at the center of the migration crisis, will host this trial.
I feel angry that the legal requirement to try and help people in distress out at sea is being criminalized right now. I'm angry because there's not a shred of evidence against us. I'm angry because we've had to wait 3 years now for this prosecution to take place, and it's very likely that this prosecution will not continue because the indictment is so poorly constructed that we might be left in limbo for years to come. And all the while it scares away other search and rescuers from the island. Today there's no more search and rescue happening on the island of Lesbos, and that's precisely because we criminalize it. What I ask Greece to do, what I ask the European Union to do, is only what it has already expressed it would do, which is to respect its own laws. Every inch of International Maritime Convention requires us to search for and to rescue boats in distress.
I'm feeling very nervous. I'm very happy that something has happened after 3 years of waiting for something to happen. So but I'm very nervous of the outcome.
What are you hoping for?
I'm hoping to take him home. I'm hoping that we get a result today that helps us to keep fighting.
I learned as a skipper at sea that you have to face your problems step by step. So the first problem, solve that, and then the next problem. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm quite confident. I have confidence in the Greek justice, and I trust the judges, of course. We are in Europe, after all.
The state of emergency has been declared in the Canadian western province of British Columbia, and that's after a major storm cut road and rail links in that region. The Canadian Armed Forces are being deployed to help thousands of stranded residents who have been trapped since the storm hit overnight on Sunday. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also pledged assistance during a visit to Washington, D.C. He says troops would help rebuild the area. One woman was killed in a landslide while 2 people are still missing. Thousands remain evacuated after an atmospheric river, a long strip of moisture in the air that transports water from tropical areas towards the poles, dumped the region's monthly rainfall average in 24 hours. Officials in that region have attributed the natural disaster to effects of climate change. Britain's Prince Charles and his wife Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, have arrived in Cairo, where they were welcomed by Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The couple landed at Cairo airport before being formally greeted by Mr. al-Sisi and his wife, First Lady Ntisa Amir, at Al Ittihadiyya Palace. The British royals are expected to take a tour of Old Cairo. They will even see the pyramids of Giza during their visit. The tour of Egypt follows a 2-day stop in Jordan on Tuesday, marking the first overseas tour by senior British royals during the COVID-19 pandemic. The president has received an audience the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the State House. The U.S. top diplomat's motorcade drove into the presidential complex this afternoon for a scheduled meeting with the president in his office. Both are expected to discuss possible security assistance from the United States in view of the security challenges currently facing Nigeria, especially terrorism in the northeast and the northwestern part of the country. After the meeting with President Buhari, the Secretary of State will proceed to the office of the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, where they will sign some agreements between Nigeria and the U.S. before holding a joint press conference with Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, before departing the State House. He's on a 3-nation Africa tour. He made his first stop in Kenya, and he will be visiting Senegal from Nigeria. Just yesterday, the U.S. expunged Nigeria from the list of countries with religious freedom concerns. The Russian Defense Ministry has revealed that guided missile frigate Admiral Gorshkov has successfully fired in Tristan hypersonic cruise missile against the targeted location in the White Sea waters on November the 18th. That testing was conducted amid fresh confrontation between Russia and the West. Last week, Britain's most senior military officer, General Nick Carter, said that there is a greater risk of an accidental war breaking out between the West and Russia, with many of the traditional diplomatic tools no longer available. In recent weeks, tensions have been mounting in Eastern Europe after the European Union accused Belarus of flying in thousands of migrants to engineer a humanitarian crisis on its border with EU member state Poland, a dispute that threatens to draw in Russia and NATO. On November the 13th, President Vladimir Putin said that unscheduled NATO drills in the Black Sea posed serious challenges for Moscow, and that Russia had nothing to do with the crisis on close ally Belarus's border with the bloc. And still to come on the program in just a moment, we told you about the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visiting the State House. We'll bring you more on that with our guest. Also, lights, lasers and projections all illuminate Windsor Great Park as it opens to the public to enjoy a range of colorful lights and sound installations. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching The World Today. And we told you earlier about the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to the State House. Joining us now to discuss this is Stanley Achonu, is Nigeria's country director, One Campaign. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so as Secretary Blinken meets with the heads of state of Kenya, Nigeria and Senegal, the supply or lack of COVID-19 vaccine to Africa is top on the agenda. How do you assess the state of vaccination efforts so far?
So far on the continent, the average vaccination rate is about 6%. Here in Nigeria, it's just 2% of the population that is fully vaccinated. The G7 countries, they've made pledges to deliver about 500 million doses of vaccine to the poorer countries. Only the United States is on track to delivering on the promise they've made. They've sort of delivered 250 million doses of vaccine so far. And the other countries, all the other G7 member countries are trailing behind. So there is need for US, beyond meeting their own commitment to G7 to make these vaccines available. It's also very important that they show leadership at that G7 group and ask their colleague countries what vaccines are available. It remains a challenge. Vaccine availability remains a challenge for poor and low-income.
So what should African leaders be saying to Secretary Blinken talking about the vaccine availability during their talks, which you just mentioned now?
So very important that the African leaders that he'll be meeting during this visit are emphasizing the need for him to make the vaccines available. A few of these countries are paid for vaccine, they are not readily available because the developed countries have bought up production for the next few years. So it's extremely important that pressure is mounted on the US Secretary of State to also ask his colleagues around the world to do more to make the vaccines available. Nigeria paid for some vaccine. We do not know when the delivery will come. We have just only received 0.5 million doses again from the United States, and we're very grateful for that. But we do not need to rely on handouts. We need to be clear about plans to get the whole world vaccinated, because one country being fully vaccinated and others being vulnerable means that we are all vulnerable. There is no safety in one person being safe. There is safety in all of us being safe. So it's extremely important that these heads of a point to ask the US government to do more in terms of vaccine access, in terms of not just vaccines arriving at the tarmac, but also that the vaccines are delivered into the arms of citizens in these countries.
All right. Thank you very much, Stanley Achonu, Nigeria Country Director for One Campaign. Thanks a lot for your time on The World Today. After a ferocious debate, German MPs voted in favor of a new set of measures to help fight the pandemic. These would include access to public transport or the workplace only for people who have been vaccinated or tested. In many regions, unvaccinated people cannot use indoor leisure facilities like cafes, bars, gyms, or even the salon. The aim is to encourage even more people to get the shot. At the moment, just under 70% of the population is fully vaccinated, and that's below the EU average. Here's more on our global update.
Germany's coronavirus situation is dramatic. Chancellor Angela Merkel has said, calling for a push to distribute booster shots faster and appealing to those skeptical of vaccination to change their mind. Early on Wednesday, Robert Koch Institute reported that confirmed cases had increased by 52,826 as the pandemic's fourth wave tightened its grip in Europe. With over 1,200 daily COVID-19 deaths in Russia, the government is considering mandatory QR codes. Most of Russia's 80-plus regions lifted a week-long workplace shutdown at the beginning of last week. It was designed to curb a surge in case numbers. The pandemic situation remains uneasy in Russia despite some improvement. With the world still in grip of the COVID-19 pandemic, Chinese scientists are accelerating the development of COVID-19 medicines. Tsinghua University, the Third People's Hospital of Shenzhen, and Bri Biosciences have jointly developed a cocktail therapy of monoclonal antibodies, which are derived from antibodies isolated from people who have recovered from COVID-19. Belgium has tightened its coronavirus restrictions, mandating wider use of masks and enforcing work from home as cases spiked in the country's fourth COVID-19 wave. From Saturday, all people in indoor venues, such as cafes and restaurants, will need to wear a mask unless seated, and the rule will apply to those aged 10 and older. Previous age threshold was 12. Nightclubs may have to test their guests if they want to let them dance mask-free. People wanting to eat in a restaurant or go to the theater already must present a COVID pass, showing vaccination, a negative test, or recent recovery. Most Belgians will also have to work from home 4 days a week until mid-December and for 3 days per week after that.
More than 125 people who were caught up in the deadly Astroworld music festival crash have sued rapper Travis Scott and other organizers for $750 million. The family of Axel Acosta, one of the 10 victims, are among those bringing the legal case in the U.S. It claims Mr. Scott and guest star Drake kept performing despite accounts of lifeless bodies being passed through the crowd in full view of the stage. The rapper had said that he was not aware of the tragedy until coming off stage. Last week, Mr. Scott said that he was distraught by the events in Houston, Texas on November the 5th, and he promised to provide aid to every affected family. Papers filed in the U.S. also named festival promoters Live Nation, technology giant Apple, which streamed the concert, Scott's record labels Epic and Cactus Jack, the operators of Houston's NRG Park venue, as well as firms who provided security and medical services. To our lighter stories now, the 52nd edition of the Sao Paulo's Fashion Week stretched into Wednesday, featuring designs based on the popular mobile-based game Free Fire. The designer Daniel Ueda created 20 looks inspired by characters in the mobile battle royale game. The looks were produced at the Alagacorn design shop run by Fabio Souza and Alexandra Hechkovich. With about 150 million daily gamers, Free Fire is one of today's most popular mobile-based games. In April last year, the 51st edition of Sao Paulo Fashion Week was cancelled due to the pandemic restrictions, but it was later taken online. Sao Paulo Fashion Week runs from November the 16th through to the 21st. Now, this year, a section of Windsor Great Park will be lit up and guests giving the chance to enjoy a range of colorful lights and sound installations. Known for its connection to the British royal family, the Windsor Great Park, which is opening to the public from tomorrow, November the 18th, offers illuminated promises with dazzling lights and breathtaking projections. The Vice President of the Arts and Entertainment section, Richard Guest Connell, also says it is the first light trial to be held on the Crown Estate, and it's set around the park's Count Pond.
That was excellent. Fantastic. I thought it was, I loved it. I think.
Oh, that's the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Enjoy the rest of your day.